Hey, folks, we're going to get right to the story. It's quite a longer one, so I don't want to keep you longer than we have to. I made a mistake when we recorded tonight's story. We in fact recorded it a couple nights ago, but we have moved studios, and in our haste or my haste of setting up this studio, I had a brain fart with some equipment, and I did not capture our intro and our outro of the recording. So I had to add them and edit them in and bring it to you. So I am going to just cut us right into the interview. But before we do that, I wanted to let you know a little bit about it. Our guest tonight is very special to me. I was extremely excited for the conversation. I believed that it was going to be very informative, that I was going to learn things that I didn't know about this person and how they felt about the experience I had in the military. And our guest tonight is none other than my father, Mr. Roger Leonard. And I will tell you right now, before you even see it, that this is going to be my most favorite interview that I do. Some others may find it boring or whatever, but I learned a lot. I learned a lot about how my father felt watching me walk off to war. So we're going to hear my dad's story about how he felt sending his son off to war for the first time. And so let's pick up the interview right at the beginning. So without further ado, my father, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Roger Leonard. Mr. Leonard, hey, Dad, how are you?
Doing quite well. Quite well.
Very good. Well, I'm glad that you're here. Let's just get right into it. First of all, before we get into your story, take a couple minutes and just let the audience know. I mean, I could tell your story about who you are and what you've done and where you've been, but I can't do your story justice like you can do your story. So just take a couple minutes and tell us a little bit about who you are and what your experience is, and then we'll get down to it.
Well, I was born and raised in St. Paul, Minnesota. Went to high school in St. Paul. Went off to college in Mankato in southern Minnesota. And did my time there. Graduated and came back home to the cities and became a police officer.
Well, hold on. Let everyone know what year you graduated.
Graduated out of high school in 73.
Ooh,
Graduated out of college in 79.
there you go. Okay. So we all know that I'm not super old because my dad isn't super old. Anyway, continue.
And later became a police officer in the city that I grew up in.
Yep.
So, and
How long?
oh, almost a quarter of a century.
Yeah, it was a long time.
Yep. So close to 25 years.
So I can, just for clarity, folks, I can remember being in second grade and my dad coming to pick me up from school in his squad car. And the next morning going to school and being like the biggest dong on the block. Right? Everyone thought it was awesome. So I was pretty elated by that. Okay, Dad. So you spent almost 25, 26 years as a police officer in St. Paul.
Yes.
What were like a few of give us two or three of like your fondest memories as a police officer?
Well, when I first came on the job, I worked as a beat officer in St. Paul. And then I spent about 2.5 years doing that. Got transferred and went into somewhat of a street crimes unit where we worked on guns, gangs, and narcotics. And the force unit was about dealing with certain situations, quality of life issues in neighborhoods. And the force unit was focusing our resources on community empowerment, to try to get the community and the police department to working on the same page, to taking care of those problems like street level narcotics, lewd conduct, drinking in public, things along that nature that would cause problems for people who lived in the communities for many, many years, and all of a sudden seeing the community deteriorated with crime-related things related to so-called quality of life issues.
Okay, this is a softball for you. How do you think that those things that you worked on all those years ago, how do you think those things are going now in law enforcement? We don't want to get super political, but just I'm curious what your view on it is.
Well, you have to remember when I was on the force, we did not have cell phones. We did not have DNA. So the technology in law enforcement wasn't there quite yet. So it was a little bit different type of ball game out on the street. So, but once the technology caught up to where we needed to be, things were a whole lot easier and simpler for us to do our job.
Okay.
So,
all right. And then where in this story did my chunky ass come along? Where were you? You weren't a police officer already when I came along?
no, you weren't. And, I wasn't anyways. I came along, you were probably 5 years old, little after your 5th birthday.
Okay.
When I came on the force.
Right on.
Yeah, you were just a little pipsqueak.
I still am. What were you doing before that?
I worked at a computer company called Control Data.
That's right.
Yeah, and I was involved in doing training videos for disk storage drives. I worked in peripheral products within the company, and so I was involved in doing video productions on training films and how to
So
mass
you were
produce these.
you were famous on TV and video before you even became a police officer.
A little bit, yeah.
That a boy. See, this is a family business, folks. It just took us a while to figure it out.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's fast forward. All these things happen. You had me. Life happens, and then so a little bit about me. After high school, I went to Minnesota State University, Mankato, to play football, where I played for a little while, and due to injuries, and probably partly because of grades, that whole thing ended for me. And I came home, and I had some jobs here and there. I remember working at a lot of car dealerships, washing cars. I enjoyed it.
Yeah.
And then I ended up at one point selling Kirby vacuum cleaners. Do you remember that?
I do. I remember you selling Kirby vacuum cleaners. I remember you selling cell phones.
Yeah.
I remember you selling cars.
I've sold a lot of stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
But where I'm going with this is, so the military teaches us a lot of hard lessons. And I think for a lot of people, those hard lessons they're difficult to process and they don't always sink in. I referenced selling Kirby's, Dad, because when I was selling Kirby's is when I fucked up and you took my car from me. Do you remember that?
I do remember that.
And I don't know that you and I have ever really talked about it. And I'm sure that you can imagine I was super pissed. I was so mad. I probably cussed you out in my head a million times.
I felt it.
Did you?
Oh, yeah.
Really?
Yeah, I felt it, yeah.
Oh, well, expound on that. What do you mean?
Well, I can remember the day that when I told you you had to bring the car
Yeah.
back to me, that you were quite upset. And I wanted you to understand the agreement that we had when I gave you that car. You were supposed to take care of it, make sure you change the oil in it, do the maintenance, pay the insurance,
Yeah.
all of those. And if you-
Which now is a pretty easy thing to do. But back then, for whatever reason, it was difficult.
and that was the agreement that we had.
It was?
And that agreement did not happen, so you had to forfeit the vehicle.
Was it, so now being a father myself, and having an adult children, stepchildren and my own children, all adults, I have figured out that sometimes these hard lessons for our kids to learn are difficult for us as parents too. Was that difficult for you?
As a child growing up?
No, as my dad to take my car.
Well, yes, in a disappointing way because of the fact that we had an agreement and that did not happen. So it felt like you kind of let me down a little bit.
Yeah.
And so I felt bad about that, but it was a lesson that had to be learned,
Yeah.
and that's the way it happened.
But you stuck with it.
Exactly.
And I think a lot of times nowadays, many parents, their kids will put up a fight or they'll cry or they'll put on some dog and pony show, and parents will just, okay, well, do better next time.
It's about follow through.
Yes. Folks, I'm here to tell you that this guy, Mr. Leonard, is all about follow through. And being an adult now, and even shortly after that, I mean, I got over it, of course. I saw the value. And so I just want you to know that I appreciate that you did follow through with that. Even though at the time, if it could have been you and me throwing hands on the sidewalk, I probably would have tried and got my ass kicked. But I probably would have tried. So
Well, I didn't show you all the things that I knew
That's
before
true.
you went in the military.
that's true. That's
So-
true. That's why I say I probably would have got my ass kicked. Okay. So, and I bring that up because that was like the starting point for me when I realized that the military was probably going to be a good option for me. It was probably the structure I needed. It was probably the guidance that I needed. I don't know that there were a lot of people around me in my support system that would have been able to break through the way that the United States Army did, even though many people were banging their head on the pavement to try to get me to understand a lot of different things. But that was the one thing that really kind of stuck out to me as the start of my path to the military. And so then I get there. I joined in 2002, April of 2002. And in September of 2005, we were deploying to Iraq. So here now, after 15 minutes of pleasantries, here's now where we get to the meat and potatoes of the show. In Stillwater, Minnesota, at the high school, is where our National Guard company had our deployment ceremony, which you attended.
Yep.
Many people in our family attended. It was a very interesting time for me. I had a new baby. Devin had just been born a few months before. And so, like, this whole rush of emotions that I was feeling just kind of didn't seem like it was really all that important at the time, because there was a whole lot of other people around. There's a whole lot of other emotions going on. And then on top of all that, we had a job to go do. So how was that experience for you, Dad? And like, this is the story that I think we wanted to highlight. This is the start of your journey as my father, sending your son off to war, starting at the deployment ceremony all the way to coming home. And so, do you remember sitting in that gym?
I do remember, and just another noted point was that I remember when you came and told me that you went down to sign up and enlisted in the United States Army, Minnesota National Guard. And I go, well, being here in the National Guard, he would be here in the state.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, we find out that you were becoming mobilized
Yeah.
to get ready for deployment. And I was thinking to myself, deployment to where? When I find out you're going out of state, out of country, into theater.
Yeah.
And the first thing that came to me was when I was a kid growing up, and I had friends that had older brothers. Some got drafted, some enlisted, but they were going to Vietnam. And then later finding out from my friends that their older brothers weren't coming home. And then others did come home, but they were never right again after that.
Yeah.
And so that that was a realization for me, knowing that you might not come back home. And your son, my grandson, was only a few months old,
Yep.
not knowing what would happen to his father. You know, my son being thousands of miles in some desert and not knowing if he's going to ever come home. Yeah, it was very scary.
Do you remember when you were a kid, did you ever see the cars pull up in the neighborhood to tell? Did they do that in Vietnam when a family lost a soldier? Did they, like they did in World War II, did cars pull up and they come and tell the mom or the wife or whoever that they've lost their loved one?
I never saw that, but I do remember hearing from my friends that their older brother or uncle was killed in Vietnam.
Okay.
Yeah. But I never actually witnessed, the military coming to their home.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. That'd be a tough one, man. It'd be a tough day. Okay, so we had the deployment ceremony. It was all over. Everyone was kind of saying their goodbyes, which to me was really weird. Because they had this like hour and 10-minute long ceremony. And then, all right, well, say goodbye to your families. We got to go. And you're thinking to yourself, well, hold on. We're like leaving at 3:30 in the morning. Like my mom's here, my dad's here, my wife is here, my kid's here, my other like everyone's here, and I gotta just like, all right, see you later. It was an interesting emotion that I had. I was pissed. I think I was pissed off about it. But I will say that that day, Dad, was the first time I had ever seen you cry. I've never seen you shed a tear. And so for me, that was very powerful because for many years, like you're the you're the dude that I was scared of, right? Like I'm not going to fuck this up because I'll tell you one thing. I was always I never got arrested and I never got in trouble with the police because I was always told by my dad, if you go to jail, you might as well just stay there because if they call me, I'm going to shoot you myself.
Exactly.
And that always, and yeah, I'll tell you what, call it what you will. But I always remember that, and I always thought about that. And then here we are, all these years and months and weeks and days later, and this is the first time I'd ever seen you shed a tear. And so, like, that kind of stopped me in my tracks, and I didn't know how to process it. And I think I just hugged you, and we talked for a couple minutes, and then it was time to go. Do you remember how you felt leaving there?
I do. Leaving the school, I thought those things that a lot of families thought that the possibility is real. You're going in the theater and not knowing if or when I'll ever see you again.
Yeah, it's tough.
It was very tough. And for me to go to work every day and having that on your mind, where I had to sit that aside because I'm out here doing what I'm supposed to be doing, protecting and serving the community.
Yep.
And but deep in my mind, thinking, is he okay? Where is he at? Is he under fire? Is he out on patrol? All of those things.
Did you have any idea what I was doing?
Didn't have a clue. All I know is that you were on your way to Iraq.
But for the time I was gone, did you, I mean, we weren't supposed to tell, right? Like we weren't supposed to say what we were doing. But did you have any idea at all what our mission was or, because I think I told Mom that I was sorting mail or something like that. What did I tell you that I was doing?
That you were you were over in the desert. You never really told me.
Full of information I was.
Yeah. You never told me. And I guess with that being said, it just kind of was in my head that you were over there doing what you were supposed to be doing, you know? And
Yeah.
there was many times where weeks and months went by and not hearing from you. It was kind of heartbreaking not knowing where your son is, knowing that you were in theater and fighting a war that I really didn't know what was real and what wasn't real because of all the stories that were being told about weapons of mass destruction and all those things that was popping up in the news, never knowing if what was true, what wasn't true, but in harm's way, because we did hear, Americans were being killed.
Yeah, and I think we were there. That first deployment was the height of the war. I mean, we'll get to this, but we got extended. President Bush initiated the surge, and his reasoning was instead of training up a ton of people super fast and sending them, we'll just keep the people that are there longer because they're already there. They're already doing the mission. They already know the locals. They already know what's what. And that was, I mean, shit, we were ready to come home. Right? I think that I had sent a box of all the stuff that I could have lived without, the stuff that I had that I probably should have had, but I can live without it for a couple weeks so I don't have to carry it on my back home. We all sent boxes home, and it'll make it there in a couple months, no big deal. And then we got home, we got back from a mission. We were all sleeping because we worked overnight. We worked throughout the night. We got back real early in the morning. You do your truck maintenance, grab some chow, take a shower, and then, for God's sakes, get some sleep. And I think we had been sleeping for like an hour and a half, and then this pounding on the door. It turns out it's the first sergeant, and he lets us know that there is a brigade-size formation. And so for those of you who don't know, a brigade-size element is thousands of soldiers. For us, it was like 34 or 3,500 soldiers or something like that. And so when your company first sergeant tells you, hey, there's a brigade-size formation, that means that 3,500 soldiers are going to be at this place. Don't be late. Don't miss it. If you do, you're not going to be a happy guy. We all looked at each other and we all said, oh, fuck, man, we're getting extended. And sure as hell we did. My question to you, Dad, is how did that news get funneled home? Because I think I only told Danielle, who is my now ex-wife. And I'm quite certain that I would have told her, make sure you tell my parents. And I'm assuming that she probably didn't.
We found out after the fact, at least I did. And by the time I found out, you were already well extended. And we thought you were coming home.
Yeah.
So
did we.
And that didn't happen. And the first thing I thought of is, oh, man. I started to worry even more. Because how long is he going to be extended? When's he going to come home now? And it didn't happen, and it didn't happen. And then the thing that I dreaded most is when I found out what happened to you. And that was very nightmarish for me.
Oh, you're talking the IED?
Yes.
Yeah, so we had started sending stuff home. We found out we were getting extended. Our extension hadn't officially started yet, but we had been notified already that we were staying. And that was when our truck was hit with the big IED, the one that I was awarded the Purple Heart for. And those things are that whole process, in my opinion, is quite insensitive to soldiers' families because they don't tell anybody anything. So when your soldier gets injured or wounded in the line of duty, the Pentagon calls your next of kin. So in this instance, it would have been my now ex-wife. And they tell them, Mr. So-and-so or private or sergeant or whoever, whatever your rank is, Leonard has been wounded in action, but he's alive. And he'll call when he can or something like that. And then that's it. They hang up on you. And so then you're just left wondering. So what happened? Where is this person? And alive can mean a whole lot of things. Do they have all their limbs? Do they still have a face? Are they in a coma but alive? I mean, are they going to be a vegetable? I mean, there's all kinds of alives. But they don't tell anybody anything. It's all about operation security. And so what they say is when they brought me to the hospital and they thought I was ready and able, the lady actually told me, the nurse, she told me, she said, if you're willing and you can, you should probably call home. Here's a phone card. They gave me a phone card. And they said, because the Pentagon is going to call your family and they don't tell them any information. So your family's going to be freaking out. So if you're willing and able, here's a phone card, call your family so that they know you're okay. And that's what I did. But the Pentagon had already called, I guess. And so what were you told about that whole thing?
Well, we found out, days later, and just as you said, we only got the information that you were wounded, didn't say how bad, what your injuries were. And at that time, we didn't get the information from the Pentagon, your mother and I. It went straight to your wife. Mm-hmm. And so we don't know, at that time, we didn't know how severely injured you were.
So you didn't hear shit until you heard it from her.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yep. And it wasn't, she didn't go into detail as to what your injuries were and how bad they were. She just said that he got injured on duty. Yeah. So we didn't get a whole lot until after the fact.
And you know what, Dad? I should probably admit this now. I probably could have done a better job myself at keeping in touch with you and Mom and other people. Mm-hmm. The challenge that I ran into was that it was always an hour-long wait for the phone. And we only had like 12 of them. And so I just didn't want to deal with it. And it's probably, now hearing you talk, it's probably sounds pretty fucking insensitive of me to not wait an hour. But what's done is done. And so for that, I probably owe you and Mom an apology. I probably could have done better at those things. What about the coming home process? Was the family as a whole notified about our coming home and how that was going to work and where it was going to be, or anything like that? Or were there any other, through the course of the time I was deployed, and here you were going to work every day, worried, were there any other issues with the whole thing at all, about not getting information or anything like that? Was there any other issues that happened?
Well, when we found out that you were coming home, we got the particulars from your wife, mm-hmm. The location and the time, and your mother and I, we all went together as a family.
Yeah.
To that location, and we waited for you to show up, and I remember when you got off of the transport.
Yeah.
I tell you, I was happy. That was one of the most happiest times in my life.
Yeah, well, I got off on my own power.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because we didn't know, what injuries you had, sustained, and I was constantly worried about if you had all your extremities, and if so, how bad were you? Were you limping, or are you missing anything? All of those things were going through my head until I saw you get off the transport. I tell you, I was,
it was a good
so
feeling.
relieved. It was, yes, it was. It was a really good feeling,
Yeah.
you know.
Well, and I'll say this. I don't know that I envy the position that you or mom or anybody that sends their children off to war are in. I think that it's a very tough situation to be in because you have zero control. You get almost zero information. And when you talk to your child, and maybe it's different now. I mean, it's been quite a while since I've been in or deployed anyway. But there's just not a whole lot to go on. And maybe now it's a lot easier with the internet and you can email and you can do this and you can do that. And we had that capability, I suppose, when we were there, but it wasn't like it is now. I think that the cell phone that I had was, like the size of this little bag right here that has these USB things in it. And like you could barely read the screen, and it was in Arabic, and the phone cards were super expensive. And so I don't envy it at all. And I think, in fact, that for the soldiers, it's a lot easier for them to be there. And maybe we've discussed this on the show already. I know we've discussed it on the Richard Leonard show on Rumble. But it's a lot easier for us to be away. You get up every day, you go, you shit, shower, shave, you go get breakfast, you go do your job, you come back when you're done, however long that may be. You go to the gym, you go get chow, you clean up, you do your maintenance, you do your weapons maintenance. You go to supply and reload all your ammo and your flares and your grenades and your water and this and that and blah, blah, blah. And then you go back to your room, play video games, watch a movie, go to sleep, or just hang out with the guys and smoke cigarettes until you go to bed. That's the easy life, in my opinion. Where other people see it as not very easy is while you're doing all of that, there's rockets and mortars coming on the base. When you're out doing your job, you're getting blown up, you're getting shot at. There's people constantly trying to take advantage of you in whatever way they can to get ahead, meaning the enemy. So that part sucks. But we know where we're at and we know what we're doing. For our parents, they just got to wonder. They got to wonder, and then hopefully they don't watch the news. Hopefully they don't talk to hopefully they don't talk to people who are negative. Did you ever talk to anybody about me or us being away that was negative about it?
Not at the time, no. But I do remember some of the ill feelings when media, when you're watching the news, and you're getting bits and pieces and not knowing where you're at. But there was, constantly broadcasting on the media, Americans are getting hurt, some are dying. And all you could think about is your loved ones. There were so many times I had that constant thought about when my friends, when I was a kid, hearing about their older brothers and family members not surviving. That was a constant thought all the time. And trying to not pay so much attention to the news, because there was some negative things about the war.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
And so, and there was some of my coworkers on the department. They knew about you, and they knew about others that were over there. And there was always question, hey, have you heard from Rich? Have you heard from Son? And no, I haven't. This week I haven't. And so there's always that constant thought in the back of my head, where you're at, are you safe?
Yeah.
All of those things that are rambling inside of me.
Did you ever, Dad, get the feeling that, and I've only heard this a couple of times from people, and I don't think that it was it was a very strong opinion. But did you ever hear from people, or do you ever get the feeling that, you watch your son go away, you don't quite know where they're at, you don't quite know what they're doing, you know that it's war. You in particular, because you're a police officer and were involved in the things you were involved in, you kind of understand that side of humanity and how nasty and brutal it can be. Did you ever get a feeling like there was some selfishness on my part by not being in better contact with my family? Because it's something that I've struggled with in my thoughts over these years. Like maybe I could have been better at talking to my mom and my dad, my sisters, and I just didn't. And part of the reason I didn't is because and still to this day, I believe that a lot of the stuff that happens there doesn't belong here, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes sense, but I always thought too that maybe you weren't in a position to be able, to let us know because of the sensitivity of the military in itself. Being in theater is a whole lot different than being stateside and being in the military.
Yeah.
So I kind of understood that, with also knowing that you're my son, and every so often, how these thoughts come to mind, and sometimes you can't control your thoughts, and sometimes you can't always trust your thinking, but then they continue to come and go. And sometimes, depending on the kind of day that you're having, your mood is high, your mood is low, and you think about everything. You think about sometimes the negative when you should be thinking about positive. No news is good news, kind of mentality.
Well, I think that's a good words to live by in that scenario anyway. Yeah. Did you have any of the same feelings or thoughts when I deployed the second time?
No, because I looked at it like it was kind of like the war was starting to de-escalate, and it didn't seem like we as a country was actively fighting like they were during your first deployment. And knowing that you weren't in the front lines, so to speak, that you were there kind of like more on an administrative type assignment.
Yep.
So it didn't seem like you were in harm's way. So your second deployment was a whole lot easier than the first.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, we had a swimming pool, for Pete's sake. It was a lot easier. Yes, it was. So I don't know if you know this, but I volunteered maybe 3 times. 2 for sure. I don't know. Maybe I didn't volunteer the third time. Maybe it was more than. I guess I don't even remember for sure. But I volunteered multiple times to go to Afghanistan. I was never selected. And I volunteered for infantry missions. Had I been selected, and I know this is probably not a fair question because you don't know this, would you have had a conversation with me to try to get me to change my mind?
I would have had a conversation with you, but I don't know if I would have been able to change your mind because
Well, yeah.
because when you left to go to Iraq, you were on a mission.
Yeah.
You know, you were definitely on a mission. But I can tell you is that your first deployment and when you got wounded and when you came home, I knew in an instant that you had changed.
Really?
Yes.
Well, that's interesting. Let's talk about that.
Because when you went, I remember, even though I was feeling bad about all of those issues that we talked about earlier, that you were like really gun ho about going overseas, going in the theater and all of that stuff, and like you were that individual, like nothing's going to happen to me.
Oh,
Kind of
yeah.
mentality.
Yeah.
Because I knew how you were. But when you came home after being wounded, your whole mindset, the whole way you carried yourself was different. It was
Wow.
different.
Different how?
The things that you would say, the things that you were doing before you went over there, those kind of things weren't important to you when you came home. When you came home, it was like, I need to take care of my son and take care of my family. All of those other things, all that gun-ho thing about being in the military and going over there and kicking ass and taking names, or don't take no names.
Yeah. Let God sort them out.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I didn't see that. You were so focused on your son and seeing to it that you were there for him. You were quiet, all the things. And I remember when you were going through that transition coming home, that he said, Dad, all the stuff that I went through over there is nothing. It's nothing anymore. My focal point now is to take care of my son. And you had this calmness and this ease about yourself. You know, you weren't loud like you were before when you went over there, you know.
Yeah.
You were just you were mellowed out a lot. And it changes. It changes your perspective on life, on what's important and what's not important. And I saw a little bit of that in myself working the street, going through some of the pain and agony of watching people go through life, miserable, doing really stupid stuff and getting caught up in it. So when you came home after being wounded, you were a different Richard.
Yeah.
You weren't the same Richard going over there when you got home.
I think that I can agree with you there. I think that I was also different in different settings. I think that when I was with my family, like you and mom, uh, my son, I was instantly starting a divorce, so I didn't care about being with her very much. But my sisters and all that stuff, the family that was important to me, I felt calm. I felt protected in a way, maybe is a good word. But when I was not in that setting, I was fucking pissed. I was so mad for so long. And so it's interesting to hear you say that because I agree with you that I had those traits when I came home because those were the things that gave me comfort, even though in my mind and in my chest there was chaos. It was one hell of a struggle. But it's interesting to hear you say that. I should ask Mom if she feels the same way. But I know for sure that I intentionally put myself in places to be around those people. Like I drank way too much when I wasn't around my family. I did a lot of reckless shit, Dad. And maybe we should talk about that, not on the camera, because there's a lot you don't know. But that was my comfortable place. That was my happy place. That's where I could go and not have to worry about anything that was bothering me. Yeah. Well, I'm glad that you recognize that. I'm glad that you were able to see that because that means I wasn't crazy because that's what I felt. So, thank you, thank you for that. That's awesome. Man, I don't know how to feel about that. I mean, I'm happy that you said that, but that caught me off guard. See, this is the power, folks, of like telling stories and sharing information with people. This man's my father. I had no idea that he felt that way. And I'm happy that I do. Dad, if you had to leave the world with some words of wisdom about how to see your kids off to war and how to navigate that whole process from beginning to end. And then even after that process, because I mean, we've had some conversations about the struggles I've had. But you also have to, as a parent, support your children through that the best you know how. If you had to leave the world with some words of wisdom about this whole topic, what would that look like to you?
Well, first of all, being responsible, and what I mean by being responsible, making that decision that I want to do this, put my hand up and swear, and sign your name on that dotted line, even though that you might feel scared or apprehensive and all that, you need to support your children. Support them and pray for them and understand that there's a reason why he made this decision.
Yeah.
You don't want to chastise them. You don't want to, get mad at them or anything like that. You support your children. Show them that you love them. Pay attention to what they're doing, and just go with it. And you put that in other people's hands that you're going to be okay. You know,
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what, I don't know that I'll ever be in that position. I don't think any of our kids are joining the military, but I, as I said before, I don't envy any of you that have had to send your children off to war. In fact, I commend you for having the strength to be supportive, because I don't know that anybody can really understand what it's really like. And then also, you know, take a minute if you ever get the chance and have a conversation with a Gold Star family. And then just imagine all these things that you just heard from my dad about me going off to war. Imagine all those things, and then also finding out at the end that your son is dead. And you don't get to have those conversations. You don't get to provide that support. You don't get to have that hug. You don't get to see them step off that bus. It's a pretty heavy load, I think. And so I believe that military families, especially parents, spouses, especially the kids, all need to be commended for the support that they provide. And then also just having to sit there and get kicked in the ass over and over because you don't know what's going on. While we're running around, the desert, just doing our thing. And then being told you can't talk about it. So, I don't know, Pops. Is there anything else? Anything else you'd like to add to any of this? Anything? I mean, this is your chance to talk to the world. Also, like, do you want to add anything else at all?
Just be supportive. The military, in a lot of cases, has done a lot of good for a lot of people.
Yeah.
You get the best training in the world. You're able to go to places all over the world. Sometimes it's good. Sometimes it's not so good.
Yeah.
And you do the things for our country. And we should support the military. I think the military should be the strongest entity in our country. They are our last line of defense. I grew up in a military family. My father served in World War II.
Yeah.
My grandfather served in World War I. I had uncles that were in the Navy and in the Army. I had an uncle that got his ship blown out from under him 2 times. In World War II, I had an uncle who made that trip to Normandy, stormed the beaches.
Yeah. And survived.
And survived. He survived that theater.
Shit.
And so the military means a lot to me. I know it's not for everyone, but there's something to be learned about the military, and they're a great asset to this country, and we should support them.
I agree. And also, for whatever it's worth, the military doesn't always do the best thing. The military doesn't always make the right choice. And sometimes our leadership is really lacking in things like integrity, and honor and personal courage to stand up to other things that are wrong, or the personal courage to admit when they've made a mistake. But always remember that at the core, the 18, 19, 20, 21-year-old kids that are going to raise their hand to serve this country, most of them are doing it not for money, power, or control, but because they have a sense of patriotism and they've answered this call to service. And even the folks that join that probably aren't the best suited for it, but they have this need to serve. And so I think that we should support all of those people. And when we've made a mistake and our leadership sucks, like it has in the recent past, we need to learn from those mistakes and hopefully put the right people in the right offices to fill those ranks with the right officers and the right people. So I guess if nothing else, Dad, you good?
I'm good.
Okay. And there you have it, folks. To me, this was a great story. I learned a lot from my dad about things that I never knew that he even had thoughts about. And it's probably on me for not having some of these conversations all this time. It's been years since I've been home from Iraq. But this is the exact reason why that these stories are important. In fact, you will never hear another story on this channel or any other channel from my dad about how he felt about sending me, his son, off to war. You'll never hear that again. Now, we may have him on again. I hope that he's willing to come back on and we can talk about other topics. But we'll never hear again from him about how he felt about these issues. And that's why these things are so important. And you're going to hear from a lot of other veterans that they had all these experience and they did all of these things, whether they're good, bad, or indifferent. These are all things that really happened. You know, whether we're proud of it or not, as a society, as a country, as a community, is one thing. But we have to know exactly what happened. We have to know the truth. And these stories are so important for that truth, because what we don't want to have happen is that veterans of older eras die off like we know they are. We know World War II veterans are dying off. They're almost gone. And thousands and thousands of them that made it through all of that shit. They all died with their stories. So many. And just think what we could have learned as a community, as a society, as a country, from the men and the women that served at those times, that brought us so many things that we probably take for granted today. In fact, I'm quite certain that we take for granted today. Our goal here at Three Clicks Media with this Tales Project is to bring you those stories so that there will forever be, well, as long as they stay up, but that there will forever be a place where anybody in generations to come can see these stories and understand what it was that we as a country went through, with the men and women who fought for what this country was when it was the most amazing country in the world. Some argue that it's not anymore, but we can get back there. So I would like for you to keep all that in mind. And for me, this story was my favorite of all time. So please, if you enjoy this content, if you think it's great, please share it. This project that we are embarking on, I believe, can be huge, and it can affect so many people and change perspectives and just shed light on what we've done as a country. So with so many issues that are polarizing and divisive all over the place, I feel like a lot of these stories will bring us some hope, some peace, and some memories of better times. So if you like them, please share, please like, please subscribe, help us out. We got to continue to grow this platform. We have to. So I'll let you go now. We've kept you long enough. Have a great evening, and we'll see you right on down the road. Good night.